We'll do a review on Likkutei Sichos in Chelek Chof Vav, volume 26. This is the first Sicha for the Parshas Yisro. In this Sicha, the Rebbe explains the whole setup of the Rambam in the first chapters, in the beginning of the Rambam, beginning with this week's Parsha, of course, in which we talk about the mitzvah of Anoicha Hashem Elokecho, and the Rebbe explains that the mitzvah is not just to know. I mean, it's not just to believe, but it's to know and to learn about it. As the Rebbe explains, this is part of the mitzvah. And the Rebbe goes on to also explain that all the other prokim that talk about the Maaseh Merkava, the Maaseh Bereshis, how they are all part of also of the mitzvah of Yidiyas Hashem. The Rebbe also ties it to the end of the Rambam and the Lashonis, the language of the Rambam, a very detailed, important, and very informative sikha on the general idea of believing in Hashem and knowing Hashem and what exactly is the mitzvah. So a lot of very important basic principles of Yiddishkeit are in this sikha as the Rebbe explains it from the Rambam. But first thing the Rebbe brings down about the mitzvah of Anoich Hashem Elokecho, about believing in Hashem and bringing out the idea that it's not just believing, but it's actually learning about it and getting a little bit of an understanding. As the Rebbe will say later on, there's only a limit to what we can understand, but let's go step by step. Aleph. In Minyan HaMitzvahs Betchila Sefer Mishnah Torah. So you have, the Rambam counts the mitzvahs in the beginning when he starts the Mishnah Torah, the Ada Chazokah. So the Rambam lists all the mitzvahs. Zog the Rambam. This is other, besides the Sefer HaMitzvahs La Rambam. This is the mitzvahs in the beginning, the number of the mitzvahs in the beginning of the Sefer Mishnah Torah. So the Rambam says over there, mitzvah rishoina mi mitzvahs aseh. What is the first mitzvah of the positive mitzvah? Is leida sheyesham elokah, to know that there is Hashem, that there is Hashem, shenemar, and it's based on the pasuk of Aseres Adibros, this week's Parshas Yisro, Anoichi Hashem Elokecha. That's the mitzvah aseh. To know I am God, your God, to know about God, that's mitzvah saseh. And that is also the first mitzvah that the Rambam begins his sefer. Umider mitzvah, hebt on the Rambam euch the halachas shebesifrei Mishnah Torah. With this mitzvah, the Rambam begins the laws that it's in his sefer Mishnah Torah. He starts off, Yisoid ha-yisoidos, va'amud ha-chochmes. What is the basis for all, the base of all bases, and what's the pillar of all wisdoms? Is leida sheyeshem otzurishem v'chulu, to know that there is somebody who exists from the beginning, Hashem. There's the motzui rishon, that he is the first beginning. However, when you look in the Rambam, before the Rambam comes around to say that this is a mitzvah saseh, he brings down many more details. And he brings down different things about how to believe in Hashem, and as the Rebbe will discuss. But in the Erster Halacha, zokt nit der Rambam. In the first halacha, the Rambam doesn't say this idea sheyesha motzurishin, that this knowledge, knowing that there is someone there to begin with, to start, is a mitzvah saseh. He doesn't say it's a mitzvah saseh. Nor, frier is meiriv in 5 halachas. First, he, at length, in 5 halachas, he prolongs the discussion. Und sagt kama protim wegen dem motzurishin. He says many details about this motzurishin, that one who's first, about Hashem. Und erst noch is Messiah in halacha vov, and then at the end, in the halacha vov, he concludes V'yidiyas dover zeh mitzvah saseh, knowing this is a mitzvah saseh, shenemar, anoichi Hashem elikecha, that I am God your God. So, this tells us, the Rebbe says, that there's more to just the knowing, acknowledging that there is Hashem. These details are all part of the mitzvah. The funis verstandig. So for this we understand. As Leut Shitas HaRambam, according to the Rambam's view, is the mitzvah as safe for Anoichi Havai Lekecha. The positive mitzvah from the posik, I am God your God, nit nor the yidiyah b'chlal sheyesha malaka. It's not just the knowledge that there is a God, there is a Motzi Rishon. Sheyesha Motzi Rishon, more than that, which the Rambam is the very first halacha. Nor this is his oiche koilel pratim. It also includes details. Welche erechentois is in the halachas, that in these 5 halachas, till halacha 6, that he includes in that, wegen dem Eberstein. Whatever he talks about the Eberstein, that's part of this halachas. As the Rebbe will say later on, the source from the Raf, from the Zohar, very clearly, as the Rebbe will continue later on. But now we see in the Rambam, it's more than just the general knowledge that there is God. There is details in knowing what is God that we are taking some details about it. Barbanel is mevayer, as the Barbanel explains in Besifrei Rosh Hashanah, in his sefer called Rosh Hashanah, he explains there, Arob Gebrach, that has been brought down in Sefer HaMitzvos Letzamach Tzedek. In the Sefer HaMitzvah Tzedek, as Loit Shitas HaRambam, that according to the Rambam's view, is the mitzvah von Amonis Elikus nit mer nit as a lakanim tzibelvad. He says believing in God is not just, it's not only to know that there is existence, that there is a God, sheyesh lakan nimtza, that there is a God that exists. That would be a problem, the Barbanel explains. If we just know, you can't have a mitzvah to know that there is God, because when you say mitzvah, that means you know already that somebody's commanding this mitzvah. How could there be a mitzvah about God? You need a God to command the mitzvah. If the mitzvah was just to know that there is God, then you have the question. That's what the Abarbanel, the Rosh Hashanah, asks. How is it fitting to count believing in God that this is part of the mitzvah? The ganze inyan von a mitzvah, what is the idea of a mitzvah, is shaykh nor, it only applies, it could only be a mitzvah if it's do a mitzvah, that there is somebody who commands the mitzvah. A mitzvah is a commandment, there is a commander, there's somebody who gives the mitzvah. So how could you have a mitzvah to know that there is God? You have to know already that there is a commander. Is doch nicht scheich zu sagen, so it doesn't fit to say, as is a mitzvah to glauben, that there's a mitzvah to believe, as is do a mitzvah mitzvahs, that there's a commander of the mitzvahs, because what do you mean it's a mitzvah? When you're saying it's a mitzvah, you're saying there's a commander of the mitzvah. So how could it be a mitzvah to believe? So that's why the Rosh Hashanah explains that there is more to it. It's not just to know that there is Hashem, nor what the mitzvah is, as that this God, Hashem, blessed be He, we already know that He exists. That's why we have a mitzvah. The mitzvah is Anoich Hashem Elikecha, to know that His existence is the very first, the Yisro Sholim, and it's the most wholesome. Asher b'chol ha-mitzi is that it's in all existence. He is the very first and the very wholesomeness of all existence. As the Rosh Hashanah, the Barbanel belongs to this. So, und der Fahr is the Rambam Magdim, and that's why the Rambam, before he says this is a mitzvah saseh, he doesn't say it right after knowing Hashem in the first halacha. The Rambam Magdim, the fin of halachas, he introduces the 5 halachas, benegayet to mitzias Hashem, as it relates to the existence of Hashem. Why does he do that before saying that this is a mitzvah say? Val the mitzvah fun hamonas yedias alakus, because the mitzvah of believing and knowing about godliness, knowing Hashem, fodert as menzol wissen, this demands that we should know al kol ponim. Minimally, we have to know deep protim, these details, wegen the Metzias Hashem, about the existence of Hashem. The Rambam brings in the most important, minimal amount of information that we need to know about Hashem when we talk about knowing Hashem. V'azoy hu yizborich is der Yeser Sholem Asher b'chol ha-metzias v'chulu. That Hashem is the most complete of any of all of existence, that He is the most existence. So the fact that the Rambam writes that it's a mitzvah after telling you some details is because precisely the Rambam's opinion is not just believing in God is the mitzvah, because that would not even apply a mitzvah, as the Rosh Hashanah asks. But over here we have to know the details, that Hashem is the most wholesome and the most complete and the very first of everything. That's part of believing in God, and that is the mitzvah saseh. And the Rambam, the Rebbe further will explain that this is also, in the language of the Rambam, he doesn't say lahamin sheyesh elokah. He says to know. To know means to learn about it. And according to the Rambam, as the Abarbanel also explains, can't tell somebody to believe because that's in your heart, but you can tell somebody to learn about Hashem. These are all parts of believing in Hashem. The Rebbe is going to explain this whole introduction of these Rambam. Actually, even further on in all the details, are part of the Leda to know Hashem, meaning to learn about Hashem, because that's part, that explains why he brings down a lot of the details over there. If it's not a mitzvah, why does the Rambam bring it down? Let's look inside. Base. Nochmer. Furthermore, says Yedua der diuk b'lashon harambam. It's known, the precise language of the Rambam. Leida sheyesham alakah, to know that there is a God. So he uses the lashon leida sheyesham otzurishan, to know that both languages. Leida sheyesham alakah, to know that there is God. Leida, to know that sheyesh motzurishan, sheyesham motzurishan, that there is a motzurishan. And similar, the Rambam concludes, Saiba der mitzvah yediyas alakus. Both when he talks about the mitzvah of knowing Hashem, yediyas alakus, which is in Halacha Vov. Saiba the mitzvah von Achdus Hashem, when he talks about the unity of Hashem, which is in the end of Halacha Zayin. So what does the Rambam conclude there? The yedias davar zeh mitzvah says, knowing this. Again, he used the law knowing it. Nit v'hamonas davar. It doesn't say believing this, knowing this. As the mitzvah is leida, the mitzvah here is to know. Mita yedias sichlis chulu. This is an intellectual knowing it, understanding it with your mind. So the language of the Rambam also implies that it's more than believing. He says the know, to learn about it. And that's answers, the Barmalel explains, how could we say a mitzvah to believe? A mitzvah to know, to believe. Wie der Barmalel verantwortet den mit der Scheile, and the Barmalel answers the question, wie kann man ansagen auf ein Inyan von Amunis? How could we command, make a mitzvah, an instruction on a matter of belief? She'enon niknis berotzinu bechira. You can't acquire them willingly in choice. I'm choosing to believe. You believe, you believe. You don't believe, you don't believe. What does it mean to mitzvah believe? Und sagt, and he says, Ad Rambam lemono mitzvahs esse tzuras ha'emunah v'amitosa. He does not count the mitzvah, the form, belief, and truth that this is true. That's not the mitzvah that the Rambam counts, the Rishamon explains. Abarbanel explains it's the learning and the knowing. That's something which is up to you. Ki im yediyas hadvorim ha'im, but rather to know those matters. V'limudom, and to study them. Hamivim el kinyan ha'amunis. They lead you to, they bring you to acquiring the belief. So the mitzvah is to learn, to know, to understand. That's how you know about the munus. Was hayidiyas, v'hachakiris, the knowing and the investigations, v'abichinis and the tests aheim, v'hahislamdus hazois, and the studies, hamaviyas el ha'amunis, that bring you to munah. Yeah, that's a mitzvah because heim mifal harotzin v'abichina. They are an act of will and choice. You can choose to learn, to investigate, to reflect, to test, and to educate yourself. That's something. So that's why this is the mitzvah. And now the Rebbe explained also that the Rambam, after saying that this is the mitzvah, Noach Hashem Elikecha, keeps on talking about more details about Hashem's existence because this is part of the mitzvah saseh of knowing Hashem. Because up to Perik Vav, it's the absolute essentials, and then there's more details that are part that bring you to Munas, to this part of the mitzvah. Was der Rambam manugen sich nicht mit Sorgen die Protim wegen Metzias Hashem. Based on this, we can explain why the Rabbah is not satisfied just by telling us the details about Hashem's existence, Shebalochas Aleph Zayin, which are in the Locha 1 through 7. Was muss wissen zu Mekayim sein, the mitzvahs von Yediyas Elokus und Achdus Hashem, that a person needs to know to fulfill the mitzvah. He has to know about God, and he has to know that there's only Hashem Echad. But after he finishes Halacha Zayin, is Meirich, no, the noch Meiriv in the Weitedik Halachas bis the Sefer Perek, then he goes into a length in the further halachas until the end of chapter, the first chapter in the Rambam, becoming Yoni ben is Hashem, several matters as it relates to the knowing of Hashem. Some of the matters that the Rambam covers is, first of all, the Rayis from Psukim. He brings evidence from the verses as Eina Kodesh Baruch Hu Guf, that Hashem is not a body. As the Toyarim Gashmim was conceived Torah, the descriptions, the physical descriptions, which the Torah writes of an Eberstein about Hashem, Zayin Lefidaitim Shel Bnei Odom, is just according to the mind of the people. Bakol Moshel, it's only a parable. It's a metaphor when we talk Hashem in the human terms, in physical as physicals. Vegem Bakoshas Moshe talks about Moshe's request, Hareini Noas Kvedecha. He has to see Hashem's honor. Wie es ist gewesen sein Hasogem Amitz Motzei v'chulu, and how he was able to grasp in a higher level, see the truth, existence of Hashem, etc. So now we understand why the Rambam is to bring it, because otherwise, why would the Rambam bring all these halachas here? Those are not halachas. The L'chaira, seemingly, Lamai nafkemina to bring in the Shakel Vitaria in Sifra Hayad, what difference does it make to the Rambam to bring it down in his book of Hayad, which is a Sefer, Halachis, he writes it himself. It's a book of laws. Why do we need to explain about the different details that the Rambam explains about Moshe Rabbeinu's vision and about the physical God? But based on the above, is to say that Leda means, that according to the Rambam, to have knowledge about Hashem, it's part of the mitzvah. So Yesh Lema dos is negeya zum chiyuv from Leda. This is part important to the obligation to know. Because it's specifically when you know the give and take in these halachas, Demult is the Yediyas Hashem in Ha'ifim von Leda. Then you know Hashem, you take know Hashem when you know it with these details. Nit stam emuna. Then it's not just belief, not idea sichlis that a Yediyah, intellectual knowledge, not just to believe, but knowing it and understanding it and grasping it with your intellect. Besichnein achar, in using another language. Bichdei zu yotzei the mitzvah for Yediyas Hashem, in order to fulfill the mitzvah of knowing Hashem, Musman wissen al kol ponim, the Yediyas v'achakiras v'abechinas. You need to know minimally the knowledge, the investigation, and the tests. You need to know these things. Yesodiyos, the basic ones. Wegen Metzias Hashem, about Hashem's existence. The Rambam is mavayed in the Perek, which he explains this Perek. This chapter, the Rambam gives you some basic knowledge, some basic to when you investigate and test that you need in order to really fulfill the mitzvah of Yediyas Hashem. So this is all part of knowing Hashem. And that's why the Rambam brings it down in the Sefer Halachas, because this is a part of the Halacha. So the Rebbe now is going to say, where does the Rambam take this source? Where is the source for the Rambam? That it's more than believing. The Pasuk only says, no details over there. It doesn't say, seems like a mitzvah to believe in Hashem. Where does the Rambam know it's later? The Rebbe brings the source from the Zohar. Gimel, Yeshleimar, we can say as the Mokar Rambam, that the source of the Rambam, that what? That as the mitzvah of an Amonos Elokus is, that the mitzvah of believing Hashem is Aleph. Number one, is nit nor the idea klolis as a halakan nimtza, not just the general knowledge that Hashem exists, nor oich the proti wegen shleimus mitzias Hashem, but also the details about the wholesomeness of Hashem's existence, Motzu Rishon and Shleimus HaMetzias, as the Rambam brings down, Beis, and number two, as dos Gufa Muzainin and Eufen von Leda, these protim, the details, should also be knowing, not just believing. In the pasuk it just Anoich Hashem Elokecha. So you can say just to know Hashem and believe in Hashem. But here we're saying that it includes the details, and we're saying that it also includes that it has to be in a way of Yediyah. To know it is from Zohar. Now the Zohar bases himself on another pasuk, but that's the pasuk in Ba'era, because that was before Matan Torah, as the Rebbe will say, and now we're learning it from the pasuk of Anoich after Matan Torah. But the Zohar says in the pasuk, "V'yedaitem ki ani Hashem Elokechem." So here he uses the washon "V'yedaitem." You shall know. You shall know that I am God, your God. So what does the Zohar explain this? He says, "Pekuda do kadmo dechol pekudim." This mitzvah is the first, comes before all mitzvahs. Leminda leila kodesh baruch v'yedaitem, to know Hashem. There is shalito ilo, that there is a superior, supreme leader, a dominant, somebody who leads, who dominates the world. The Yuribain Olma, he is the master of the world. Ubara Almin Kulun, and he created all of the worlds. Shemaya Va'ara, all of the world, the heavens and the earth, B'chol Cheleim, and all the forces. If you look at the Rambam's Loshen is very similar to this words in the Zohar. Was the Loshen Rambam Ba'alocha Rishoyne Shaloi? The language of the Rambam in his first halacha is betoichna the Loshen HaZohar. The content is exactly as the language of the Zohar. What does the Rambam say? Yisoida v'amud ha'chochmas. Meaning the basis for all the basis and the pillar of Chochmah, which corresponds to what it says in the Zohar, Pikuda Dokad Modachol Pikudim. This mitzvah comes before Pikudim. It's the foundation, it's the Amud HaCholmes. Then it says Leida Shemoz Yashomot Surishin, which corresponds to the language in the Zohar. The Rebbe shows exactly Liminda Leila Kodesh Baruch Hu, to know HaKodesh Baruch Hu. Then it says Vuhu Mamtzi Kol Nimtzo, that he brings into being everything that is found. V'chol hanimtzoim mishamayim va'oretz u'mashe beineim, and everything that is in existence, that is finds itself from the heavens to the earth, everything in between. Loshna Rambam, look how it fits with Loshna Zohar. Ubora almin kulu shmaya va'ara v'chol chilein. Everything he created, the heavens and the earth, and all the armies, everything that's in there. So you see how it lines up exactly the Lashon Rambam with the Lashon of the Zohar. A similar in Lashon Rambam in the Locha Hey, Hamotzui Hazeh, this entity that is found, Hashem, well, he is the master, God of the world, the master of all the earth. Is al derech Lashon Zohar. This is similar to the language of the Zohar. The is shalita iloho di Rebbein Almin. The further the Zohar's word that he is the dominant, the supreme dominant, the master of the world. So as you look the language, you see that's the basis for the Rambam. Und von dem Zohar nimmt is the Rambam. And therefore, from this Zohar, the Rambam learns out. How do we know? The Rebbe asked, maybe just to believe, I don't know, to know. As Pikuda Do is verbunden mit dem wie Yedatem. Because that pasuk says Yedatem, to know, Leminda. Here it says Onoich Hashem Elikecha. But in the other pasuk it says V'yidaitem. As the Rebbe will explain, we learn from the V'yidaitem what the Onoichi is. Uns is nit maspik a idea klolis. It isn't sufficient a general knowledge that there exists, God is existent. Nor memuz visun protim wegen mitzuusi yisbarach. You need to know details about His existence, His blessed existence. For von sei versteht when you know, we know as mitziose hu yoser ishem v'yoser shalom. And the Rambam says, when you learn about it and you know about it, v'yidaitem leminda, then you can understand that he is the first, the detail, and that he is the most wholesome one of all existence. So this pasuk is the source is v'yidaitem. That's the basis for the Rambam. But of course, the Rambam brings the pasuk Anoich Hashem Elikecha, and the Zohar is on the pasuk v'yidaitem. That's not a contradiction, because we learn it out from before, and it reveals to us for after Matan Torah, which is why we do the mitzvahs. Unaf al pias der Zohar bring the Reiv dem Posik. V'yidaitem kani Hashem Elikeichem. The Zohar brings the Posik, you shall know ani Hashem Elikeichem. Uni dem Posik on Noich Hashem Elikeichem, not the verse on Hashem Elikeichem from Aseres Adibus in our parsha. He brings the Pasuk in Vayira, V'yidaitem, is Kiposhut. That's obvious. While the Zohar read wegen Moshe Rabbeinu. The Zohar speaks about Moshe Rabbeinu, that Moshe Rabbeinu was teaching the Yidden. He was telling them about knowledge of Hashem. Eider ze zijn naar Rus from Mitzrayim, before they left Mitzrayim. Bechdei die Eden sollen glauben bechol inu nisin ugevurun David Mitzrayim, so that the Yidden should believe in all of those miracles and all of those powers that Hashem did for them in Mitzrayim. Was das is given al pi hanemer damost, that was based on, that was said then, v'yidatem keni Hashem. That was the pasuk. That based, what did Moshe Rabbeinu, the Zohar discusses there, tell them then, you will know Hashem, was based upon what was before Aseres Hadibros, for them to believe in what the miracles and strength the Eibishter is going to show in Egypt. Aber das, was mir darf mekayim sein, the mitzvah, why do we do the mitzvah? Not because we died him, but Moshe Rabbeinu said to the Eden then. Is ki divra Rambam hayiduim is that the Rambam always says we don't do mitzvahs because Hashem told to Avram to do the bris milah. We do the mitzvah because Hashem told us in the Torah. Is ki divra Rambam hayiduim is no Rambam. Mitzad mitzvah sakodesh baruch ali de Moshe Rabbeinu olav hashalom b'Sinai. We do the mitzvah because Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, peace unto him, in Sinai. That's what we do it. Und der Far is the tzivur of Hamonis Alakus from Pasuk Anech Hashem Lekecha. Where do we have the mitzvah to believe Hashem? Not from V'yidaitem. That's from the Pasuk Anech Hashem Lekecha. Uvi megefint in Zoyar Gufa b'Mokom Achad. The Zoyar itself refers to this as the mitzvah of believing in Hashem. Pekuda kadmo anoichi. The very first mitzvah is anoichi. So you're going to say, how do we know that it's by Anoichi Hashem Elokecha means the Yediyah? Since this whole interpretation of Yediyah, knowing the details and the Shleimus, comes from the Pasuk V'yidaitem, so how could we learn it from the Pasuk Anoichi Hashem Elokecha, which is after Matan Torah? That's not a question, because that reveals to us from before Matan Torah to after Matan Torah, we find many times. Unsis king kashinit. This is not a question. Was die Protim Hanal wegen Eufen Kiyama Mitzvahs. That the details, above details, that the Eibishter's Mitzvahs, Achisholim, and Achirishen, and other details about how to fill the mitzvah. Lernt man aris from Posuk V'yidaitem ki ni Hashem Elikei ani Hashem. Hashem Elikeichem, which is learnt out from before Matan Torah, from Posuk Hashem L'fnei Matan Torah. Because we find this in many places as an inyan from Gilu Milsa, something just to reveal the matter to us so that we know that it exists, or the protein from a mitzvah, or detail of mitzvah. We can learn it also from the Matan Torah. The main mitzvah, the Eibishter gave us at Matan Torah to do, we're doing it because of the main mitzvah. But some of the details, in this case, the details of Yediyah, we know it from the Pasuk V'yidaitem K'nei Hashem. And that reveals to us. So basically, the Rebbe says that the source for the Rambam, that the mitzvah is not just to believe in Hashem, but also to know Hashem and to go into the details of the mitzvah. We basing it on the Zohar. And as the Rebbe showed that the words of the Zohar mamash parallel the words of the Rambam. That means that the Rambam took this from the Zohar, and that's the mitzvah more than just believing in Hashem, but actually to know the details of Hashem. That's part of the mitzvah. So the Rebbe is now going to explain actually the whole continuation of the next halachas in the Rambam, in which he talks about the Maise Breishis and the Maise Merkava. How does this all have to do with the halachas in the Rambam? The Rebbe is going to explain that by extension, knowing Hashem to a greater degree is actually learning the other parts which the Rambam brings down in the other halachas. Halacha Aleph will be the essentials, but then later on we also have the halachas, the other prokim, the Maise Breishis and Maise Merkava, which are all part included in the mitzvah of knowing Hashem. Dalet. Based on the above, we can explain something which is surprising l'chayr in Rambam. That seemingly in the Rambam, it's surprising. In zweiten Perek von Hilchos Yesod Torah, in the second chapter of the laws of Yesod Torah, hebt on the Rambam zu reden wegen the mitzvahs von Avos Hashem v'Yirosei. He talks about love Hashem and fear of Hashem. Und is mamshich, and then he continues, Hey chi haderech lahavosei v'Yirosei. So what is the path to love Hashem and to fear Hashem. B'shoshi is beinin ha'odom b'maisuv u'beruach hanifloim hagdolim. When a person will reflect in Hashem's actions, Hashem's creations, those wondrous great, and then the Yirim Mehem, so he will see, when he reflects, he'll see Chochmasei she'ein la'erech. He sees an uncomparable wisdom from Hashem, v'loikates, and no end, there was no case. Miyadu oyev chulu, then immediately he'll love Leida Hashem HaGodol chulu, to know, and also v'yifchad, and to fear. There's a Lefi Advarim Ha'ela, and based on these words, that when you appreciate Hashem and you see the greatness of Hashem, that leads you to love and fear of Hashem, says the Rambam, Ani mevayer klolim gedolim mimaise riben oilamim. I am going to explain important principles from the action of the Master of the world, and the purpose is in it, Kidei sheyiyu Pesach, that should be an entrance. It should be a doorway, an entrance, lemavin, to one who understands Levas Hashem, to love Hashem. Because once you will see the greatness and appreciate, as the Rambam will explain, that will bring you in to love Hashem. The Noch is a mamshich b'meshach gimel prakim, and then 3 chapters. The Rambam continues, v'gumaisev ubruv hanifloim, about Hashem's creations and His wondrous creations. 1 chapter, Ein Perik Veg Malachim. 1 chapter, he talks about the creation, he created Malachim. Was his atel for Maisa Merkava, that becomes a part of the act of the chariot, includes the Malachim. And the 2 Prokim, Shalachreze, and the 2 chapters that follow, Veg Maisa Bereshis, he talks about creation of Bereshis. And as the noch besayim, after that he concludes, Bisman sha'odom mizboinim b'dvorim ha'elu, when a person reflects on these matters, makir kol ha'beruim, he recognizes all the creations, moisif avo lamokim, that adds love to Hashem chulu, v'yiro v'yifached, and he's going to fear, going to tremble, etc. chulu from Hashem. So the Rebbe is going to ask all these preparations, even though they're, the Rebbe is going to say they may be part of loving and fearing Hashem. It's not just a passageway which is not part of the mitzvah, but still the great detail seems to be overdone if it's just that. The language of the Rambam in his book of mitzvahs is mashma. Over there it appears as der inyan fun yuzboinen ha'odom b'maisov, that a person to reflect in the action is not just a preparation. It's not a hechsher mitzvah. It's not only preparing for the mitzvah of avas Hashem and yiras Hashem. So you need to learn about this. No, das is the maisa mitzvah von ava. That is the actual mitzvah of ava, der tzivoy von avdom. That's the command, the person, when we tell a person to love, that's his mitzvah. Gabra is the chefza shenachshev in his boinen. The person needs to have that object, that to think and to reflect b'mitzvayso. Umamorav is quoting from Lashon Sefer HaMitzvahs. U'pu'uloisov chulu. Under noch tovei ha'ava behechrach. And then the love will come out. It have to come out. So when the person, this is the act. What is the mitzvah? What is the act of the mitzvah? The act of the mitzvah is what the person is doing. It's not later on the love that comes from it is the act of the mitzvah, the love that he'll have. The study that he should think about it. He should reflect in this Hashem's commands and his sayings and his action, and then he will love Hashem. So one can argue that the Rambam brings at length the Gimel Dalet, Beis Gimel Dalet, in these three prokim that the Rambam brings down. These are all the mitzvah of loving Hashem. The Av is going to come back. That's part of the mitzvah of Avos Hashem. But the Rebbe said that's not sufficient. Is those aber lechoyre nit kein bir masbi? Doesn't seem to be a sufficient explanation. As the Farz of the Rambam Marayshtel in the Sifrei Mishnah Torah, halachas, that's the reason that the Rambam should put in the Sefer Mishnah Torah, which is halachas, the inyone his boinenus, those aspects of reflection, durch welcher men ken me'öder sein bei sich de Chefza, Avas Hashem v'yiraseh, through which one can arouse by themselves the object to love Hashem and fear Hashem. That these aspects of reflection and meditation that brings you to love Hashem, he brings it all in all the details. This really belongs to the books that investigate, that are not halachas. The halacha is, what is the halacha? The halacha is not the reflections. The halacha is that you need to love and fear God. As Dav Zayin his bonus, the halacha is to reflect, not tell you what the reflections are, not to give you the meditations, just to tell you that there is a mitzvah to reflect. As is Dav Zayin his bonus, in Ma'asav Ubruv Anifloim, in his actions and his wondrous creation, but these explanations, the actual meditations, in Ma'asav Ubruv Anifloim, in his actions and his wondrous creations, they don't seem to belong to the mitzvah of love. That's not love. Love is to love Hashem. And there's a mitzvah to learn about, so you get to love Hashem. But not the means and not the meditations, the reflections of loving Hashem. The Mishnah Sefer Torah doesn't seem that they belong in the Mishnah Sefer Torah. So why is the Rambam bringing down all these halachas over here, even though that they lead you to the level of Avos Hashem? And the answer is, as the Rebbe explains in Ois Hey, that this is not only lead you to Avos Hashem, but this is actually a continuation of the mitzvah of Yediyas Hashem. Hey, is the beer in them? The explanation of this, the inyonim was the Rambam read arum. The idea is that the Rambam discusses in the Drei Prokim, in the 3 chapters, which is Siyu Maise Merkava, the end of the Maise Merkava in chapter 2, Maise Bereshis in chapter 3 and 4, Seine nit nor inyone his boinenus zu lieb der Grechen der noch Avos Hashem v'yiraseh. They're not just matters of reflection so that you can reach later on love and the fear of Hashem. So this is reflections only. Nor ze seinen shayich, but they also have a connection. They're also connected to the mitzvah for Yediyas Hashem, to the mitzvah of knowing Hashem, or the noch mer achelik from their mitzvah, or even more. Not only they're connected, but this is a part of the mitzvah of knowing Hashem. Wie is mevayer in Pirush von Rambam, in the commentary called Pirush on the Rambam, in the beginning of Hilchos Yisro HaTorah, he says, "V'nichlal tachas yediyas shtei mitzvahs elu," included after knowing these 2 mitzvahs, the 2 mitzvahs of the existence of Hashem and that He is only Hashem. Leida sheyesh melakah, to know that there is a God. She'en imoy kel achar, and there's no other God. So included under these 2 mitzvahs is the inyan ma'aseh bereshis and ma'aseh merkava, the ideas of the act of creation, of the beginning, and the act of the Merkava. Shemiyidi Osam, when you know them, Yivodu Harayas, that will be known the evidence al Mitzias Sabayda, on the existence of the Creator, and that He alone is the first, He is the earliest, the first, the very first, and He is the Tzur, He's the rock for everything. From Him comes everything. This is Mudgash in Loshna Rambam Atzmei, as you can also see this as emphasized in the language of the Rambam himself. As the inyonim from the drei prokim, that the idea for these three chapters, seinen hemshech zu the inyonim shebidiyas Hashem shebepedi Krishan, they are a follow-up to the matters that we learn about the knowledge of Hashem, which is in the first chapter. Aleph. How do we see this? The Rebbe brings down 3 places in the Rambam that you can see this. Aleph, in Zweiten Perek, in the second chapter, noch der Ariches wegen Malochim, after the lengthy discussion about the angels, kehrt sich the Rambam comes back to Mevar Zayin Barucha, to explain at length wie der Eibishter, now he's talking about Hashem, not anymore about Malachim, is Yedeya Atzmai, knows himself, Yedeya HaKol knows everything, Makira Mitei recognizes his truth, Yedeya Oiso, Kamoishehi, he knows it as is, Hu HaYedeya Chuluchu. We're all talking now about Hashem back. That means we're talking about something knowing about Hashem. Talking about Malachim, Merkava, about the angels, and all of a sudden we're talking back about Hashem. This is part of knowing Hashem as well. In number 2, we find the Sefer Pedic Zokter. In the end of that chapter, he says, the words, those things that we said about this matter in these chapters, Kulu, Kola ikrim shebishnei prokim elu, all the principles in these chapters, who are nikra ma'aseh merkava. This is all called the act of the chariot, the ma'aseh merkava. Beida prokim. So you see, the Rambam combines these 2 chapters together, not separate. Stellen zusammen ein inya ma'aseh merkava. So that means that this all ma'aseh merkava, one inya. So this means this is all part of Yidis Hashem. This is all one. This is not separate matters. Gimel, Besim Perik Dalet, and when he finishes Perik Dalet, you see, so the Rambam Vinyoni Arba Prokimelo. Now he combines, he says, what is the idea of all these 4 chapters? Him, Shachachamim Rishonim Koirim, the earlier call him, Oisoi Pardes. They call it the Pardes. Alle 4 Prokim stellen zusammen ein Inyan Pardes. They all put together. There's one topic here. This is Pardes, one orchard, basically meaning these are not separate from the first page with the other program. This is all part of belief in Hashem. But the way the Rebbe argues now that also these details are details in knowledge of Hashem. So why does the Rambam specifically say that this leads you to the love and fear of Hashem? This is part of the knowledge of Hashem. Why is the Rambam said that? So I say it when the Rebbe is trying to explain now, this is part of all the knowledge of Hashem. Those was the Rambam verbindt die Klolim Gedolim. And the fact that the Rambam ties these big rules, Bidinyone his bonus will bringen, so Avas Havai Virosei, with the matters of reflections that bring a person to loving Hashem and fearing Hashem. So why does he specifically connect these ideas, these great, important general rules that the Rambam discusses with loving and fearing Hashem, or not with the mitzvahs for Yidiyas Hashem and not with the mitzvahs of knowledge of Hashem? Which discusses in the Perek Rishon in the previous chapter. Is while the Rambam stellt euch die Inyonim for Yidis Hashem, because the Rambam sets up the matters of knowing Hashem, behesem to the mitzvahs to welchen sie seinen shaykh, to fit the mitzvahs, knowing Hashem as it fits the mitzvah to which they belong, those reflections in knowing Hashem to fit each of the mitzvahs. Ubebald as die klolim gedolim, since these big rules seinen negeya euch to the mitzvahs von Avas Shemira, so since they're important also to the love of Hashem and the fear of Hashem, the Rebbe stellt say the Rambam in an Oifen, so that's why the Rambam sets it up in such a way as his own sign that they should be nit nor a hemshech zu dem Friede comparing, not only a continuation of the previous chapter in which we talk about the knowledge of Hashem Kinal, because before there euch a prat for mitzvahs avas Hashem biras Hashem, but to make it also a detail of the mitzvahs Hashem biras Hashem. But this is all part of knowing Hashem, believing Hashem, as it is a detail in loving and fearing Hashem. So the Rebbe says, according to this, we can say, as the far bring the Rambam besifroi, that's why the Rambam brings in his sefer the klolim gedolim emaisi ribono elomim, these great rules from the actions of Hashem, not just to tell us a story and not just to reflect on them, to come to Avos Hashem and Yiras Hashem, but to fulfill the mitzvah. This is how we fulfill the mitzvah of Yidiyas Hashem. But bichdei zu mekayim zayin, the mitzvah for Yidiyas Hashem, in order to be able to fulfill the mitzvah of knowing Hashem, was thus made Kinal Siv Gimel, which means, as we said earlier in Siv Gimel, as mahota Yidiyas Sichlis, that you have an intellectual knowledge in the Moifim for Metzias Hashem, in the way of the Hashem's existence, Shemitziusehu Yisro Sholim, that he has the most wholesome existence. In order to understand that, is muchrich zu wissen, so you need to know, it's imperative to know al kol ponim euch di klolum gedolim. You need to know these great rules. V'bald ask Yehuva le'il, because as we quoted before, mudiyosam yivodu harayis, that from them we will find out the evidence on Metzias Habayra, on the existence of the Creator, that he is the only one, the first, and he is the rock, the bedrock. Everything comes from him. So this is part of the knowledge, intellectually knowing about Hashem. This is part of Noicha Hashem Alikecha. And that's why the Rambam brings it down, not just the reflections to bring you to Yiras Hashem, but to actually bring you the details that you need to be Mekayim, the mitzvahs Hashem, that logically the conclusion of the existence and the greatness of Hashem. And that comes through knowing these details about Hashem. Noizvav, the Rebbe is going to continue now to explain the end of the Rambam. Based on this explanation over here that Maise Merkava, Maise Bereishis is a part of the mitzvahs Yidiyas Hashem, the Rebbe is going to explain the end of the halacha, the final halacha in the Rambam, in Hilchas Malachim, Milcham Esayim, about Mashiach. Several questions over there, as the Rebbe will explain. Vov, Api Hanal, based on the above, as the Inyonim for Maise Merkava, Maise Bereishis, was the Rambam bring Besifrei, that these ideas of the Maise Merkava and the Maise Bereishis that he brings down in the Sefer, in Yad HaChazokah, seinen Muchrach zu Mitzvahs Yidiyas Hashem. They're necessary for the mitzvah of knowing Hashem. Or the Nochmer, or even more than that, not only are they necessary to know Hashem, seinen Natel davon, they're actually part of knowing Hashem. Can man euch masbir sein? So now we can also explain the letzte halacha. The very last halacha, Siyum v'chosim sefer Mishnah Torah, the end and the conclusion, the seal of the sefer Mishnah Torah, v'zel l'shoineh. So the Rambam writes, Ubayis Azman, in the time of Mashiach, lo yiyeh eisek kol ha'olam el ladas es havaya b'levad. The occupation of all of the world will just be to know Hashem alone. Ulefikach, and therefore you, Yisro Chachamim Gedolim, the Jews will be very wise, great, great wise people. The Yodim Dvorim Hastumim, and they will know the matters that are hidden, that are closed. They will understand, they will know them. And also, V'yasigu das Beirim, and they will grasp the the mind of their creator. Well, two things the Rambam says here. They'll know the Dvarim Hastumim, and they'll also grasp Das Beirim. Understand Hashem. And the Rambam adds, Kifi Koyach Adam. By the second thing, by Das Beirim, he says they will know it as according to the strength of the person. The Rebbe will explain all this. What are these two things, Dvarim Hastumim, and why Das Beirim, why Kifi Koyach Adam? And then he brings the pasuk Shenemar, Ki Mola Hores De'esavaya. The world will be filled with knowledge of Hashem. And the Rambam brings the end of the pasuk Kamayim LaYom Mechasim, just like water covers the water, the ocean. Why does the Rambam also bring this second pasuk? These are all details that Rebbe will ask now. Dapen verstehen. Aleph. First of all, what are these two things? Dvarim Hastumim and Das Beirim. Was eine die zwei Inyonim? What are these two matters? The Rambam writes, Yodim Dvarim Hastumim. They'll know those things that are closed, that are hidden. And they'll also be a Sigu Das Beirim. And from them was the Rambam is Magdim. The Rambam, before he says the different things, he says, Lo yiyeh eisek chula ladas Hashem bilvad. The occupation will be just in knowing Hashem. So it means that whether it's Dvarim Hastumim, whether it's Das Beirim, these are all Das Hashem. Is Mukhrach, we have to say, as Oich the Dvarim Hastumim, that also these hidden things, the matters that are Stumim, that are hidden, Zainam Farbundum mit Das Hashem. That's part of knowing Hashem. Is it was der Chiluk? So what is the difference between Dvarim Hastumim and Das Beirim? What is the difference between the hidden things and the understanding of their creator, the knowledge of their creator? How does that differ? What are the two things? They're both knowing Hashem. That's what everything is going to take place in La'asid. And base from Losh Rambam is mashma from the flow, the continuous language of the Rambam. It appears as the Hagbola, the limitation that Rambam says Kifi Koyach Adam, that can only understand the Koyach Adam. But this refers to specifically the second thing, that Das Beirim Kifi Koyach Adam, that the knowledge of the Creator only according to the power of the person. But not Yedim Dvarim Hastumim, they can understand. Not Kifi Koyach Adam. Here there's an extra limitation. The time of boy, so what's the reason? So first of all, what are these two things? And why is there a limitation by the Das Beirim Kifi Koyach Adam and not by the first one? Number three, why is it important here? And what does it add? The end of the pasuk, that like water covers the ocean. From the Verte, Mola Oretz De'esavayif, the world will be filled with knowledge of Vesman. We know as Lo Yisro Kol HaTorah Das Hashem Bilvad. We already know that the occupation of the whole world will be just the knowing Hashem. Mola Oretz Hashem. What does it add? Kemayim Layom Mechasim, to add, cover the word. Nochmer, and the Rebbe says, compare this in Hilchos Tshuva. Over there, the Rambam brings the first part of the pasuk, doesn't bring the end. Oich in Hilchos Tshuva, also in the laws of Tshuva, is the Rambam Metayri Mesa Mashiach. The Rambam describes the days of Mashiach when there's Zokt Hayomim Tarba Hadeya V'Chochma V'Emes, that in those days the knowledge will be increased, the wisdom will be increased, and the truth will be Shenemar. He brings the pasuk Kamalor De'esavayah, as the world will be filled with knowledge of Hashem. But he doesn't bring the end of Mayim Liyom Mechasim. And over here in the end of Hilchos Malachim, In the end of the halacha, he brings him kamayim le'yochim b'mechasim. What does this add? What does this add to the discussion? But now the Rebbe is going to say, based upon what we learned before, that all this is part of knowing Hashem, the Ma'aseh Bereshis, Ma'aseh Merkava, and this is part of the mitzvah Hashem. The Rebbe wants to divide that the two things of the Dvorim Stumim is Ma'aseh Bereshis, but they're still human. They're still created being. But whereas Ma'aseh Merkava, that's only Kifi Koyach HaOdam, because that's even higher than the Koyach HaOdam, as the Rebbe will explain. Apia Mavoirli El Zayin, based on what's explained before. As Kidei to Mekayim Zayin, the mitzvah of Yidiyas Hashem, in order to fulfill the mitzvah of knowing Hashem. Musman wissen die Inyonim from Ma'aseh Merkava, Ma'aseh Bereshit. Then we need to know the matters of Merkava and Ma'aseh Bereshit. That's part of the mitzvah of Yidiyas Hashem, as the Rebbe says, that leads to Yidiyas Hashem, or that's part of the Yidiyas Hashem. That's part of the mitzvah of Noich Hashem Alikecha v'Yidaitim K'anei Hashem. Yashleima, we can say, as the Tzvei L'Shonos Hanal, that these two languages are behesem to the Tzvei Inyonim. They fit, they mesh, and they fit to the two matters, Ma'aseh Merkava and Ma'aseh Bereshis. Ma'aseh Merkava, Ma'aseh Bereshis. Bereshis are the Dvorim Stumim. Ma'aseh Merkava is the Das Beirim. Dvorim Stumim, the hidden on them biur v'hisofer. Adoretzich wegen der Beide. Just to talk about Dvorim Stumim without saying Dvorim Stumim, just Stumim, without adding that this is Dvorim Stumim about the Beide, made in Yonif Ma'aseh Bereshis. So that means the Hashem's creation, what He created in the Ma'aseh Bereshis. The Afapi as a Zayin and Dvorim, Shein Mechaborim Megelum V'Tzura. The Rambam writes that these are actually matters, and you say that they are combined from a goylem material and a shape. So basically, what's such a big deal about them? They're like a physical matter. We talk about Ma'aseh Bereshis. They have a goylem, they have the material, and they have the shape. That's the spirituality. So it's combined. So since it's combined, a goylem with surah, but still, these are deep, deep matters. They're not easy. Also using the Lashon that the Rambam said before in Perik Dal Halacha Yud. They zayin der tail. This is Ma'aseh Bereshis. They zayin der tail from the Bria. They are the portion of creation was mizet nitoichnon b'achshivus shalem be'inei basar. You don't see their content, their meaning, their importance in the human eyes. Nor ze zayin behaltene in yonim. They're hidden things. Stumim, don't stumim. Dvorim amukim. They're deep matters. Was man darf haben adas rechava. You need a wide mind. Lahasik pirush ubir kol advorim al buriyim, to understand, to grasp the meaning and the explanation of all these matters fully. You need an interpretation. This is what the Rambam refers to. Dvorim stumim. The far ruft sie on the Rambam Dvorim hastumim. They're hidden because they're not open. You can't see what their content is. So it's not like they're lacking in their expression in the physicality, but the meaning of them, you need to be able to capture it. You need a wide mind. You need the Daya Rechava. But they're Ma'aseh Bereshis. On the other hand, of Leidach, Vibalda das is Ma'aseh Bereshis, since it's Ma'aseh Bereshis, kemen haben in them a verstand, and you can have an understanding. You can understand it. The noch wird sein a hecherer inyan v'yasigu da'as beir. Then you have even a higher matter in which you can actually reach da'as beirim. You can reach the understanding of the Creator. That's the inyonim for Ma'aseh Merkava. That's the matters of Ma'aseh Merkava. So Maisa Merkava is so aloof that even Malachim, who are just made up uh, of a shape, they don't have a physical, they're no materialism, and also they can't grab. Certainly a person can grab. The Inyon of Maisa Merkava, was afilu Malachim, wie bald das sie seinen Zurubelegelung Kalal, since they are just a shape without a Golem Klal. So even they, which don't have a Golem, don't really grasp it. Can an Odom was is mechuber megolim v'tzura? So then a human being who is made up from material and the shape, from physicality and spirituality, nidhoben ken asog emitis and say, not have a true grasp in them. Malachas kam v'kama b'negei zu das beidum. Uh, so he can't even grasp malachim. A person cannot even grasp malachim. How are you going to grasp das beidum? Which is so certainly you can't grasp that. I said before, malachim. It's not like malachim can grasp. You can't grasp the ma'aser merkava. Malachim are part of the ma'aser merkava. You can't grasp them because they don't have a chaymer. Certainly you can't grasp das beidum. Is doch sicher, is doch sicher wie der Rambam is mevayer as in the shaykh that it doesn't really fit as an odom achai shu mechuber guv nefesh, a person, a living person who is a connection from body and soul. So masik zayin amitis imotzik hashiri, to understand the true existence of Hashem as is. Und der Fahr muss der Rambam meisiv sein. That's why the Rambam has says v'yasigu das beidum kfi koyach odom. They will understand according to the power of the human, because you can't just say that Yasigu das Beidum, the Ma'aser Merkava. Ma'aser Merkava is not something you can really grasp. A person can't really grasp them. Can't even grasp Malachim, certainly not Ma'aser Merkava. Rambam asks, so when he talks about Dvarim Stumim, that's Ma'aser Bereshis, because these are physical matters. So therefore, the person can. They're dvorim amukim, so that's why they're stumim. They're hidden. They're deep. You have to explain them, but still, the person has a grasp in them because you're talking about matters that are connected. They are from a goylam and atzura. You have the spirit, the physical, so you can grasp them, but not ma'aser merkava, not malachim, and not das beiram. That is kfi koyachad. And now that I've explained, that's why also the Rambam brings the end of the pasuk here. Ches. Apizevet man ich verstehen, was der Rambam bringt dem Siyum HaKosuf. Also understand why the Rambam brings the end of the pasuk Kamayim LeYom HaChasim. Ubehagdim. The chiluk zwischen, we want to do the difference between Ma'aser Merkava and Ma'aser Bereshis is what the Rambam sagt. The Rambam says, as the yonim for Ma'aser Bereshis, that the act of creation, einom ki inyan eimek from the yonim Ma'aser Merkava, they're not as deep as the ideas in the Ma'aser Merkava. And because there's a difference actually between them, there's a difference in halacha. Because the faris the halacha and afkimin ledin, and that's why there's a difference in halacha between Ma'aser Merkava and Ma'aser Bereshis. In the from Vidarshim, how you can expound, you can teach it. But Ma'aser Merkava, but Ma'aser Bereshis, how many people to whom you can teach it to, and how many people, and what the person's the status. Kavur Rambam, as the Rambam articulates the different levels of who you get to. The Rebbe also brings down the Chochmas Elokis, Chochmas Hateva. The Rambam brings down over there in the different levels to study it. But this is a logic difference. So was das is achiluk nit nor in kamus ha'asoga. This is not just a quantity of asoga. where you can have more hasoga in Maisa Bereshis than you can have in Maisa Merkava. It's not that. As in Yonah Maisa Merkava, Zani Yisro Amukim in Yonah Maisa Bereshis, that the matters of Merkava, the act of Merkava, are more deeper than the Maisa Bereshis. Nor sees an under Eichus Veifen Hasoga. It's another quality. It's a different category. There's a different way of grasping. Maisa Bereshis, when we talk about the acts of creation, these are matters. Since they are matters that are in creation itself, ken men ze verstehen beifen chiyuvi. You, in a direct way, in a positive way, you can understand them directly. Hasogas achiv, to understand the positive, understand what they are, you get it. You get them themselves. Masha'enke Maisa Merkava, you can't get them. You can get what they're not. In Yonim Velchazayna verbunden mit Gidra Aboida, since they are matters that are associated with the definition and boundary of the Creator, say Yasigu Das Boidam, to know the mind of Boidam. These are godly, creative matters. Is the Bain is Shaykh Tzov Mahasog B'Derechi. We can't have a positive in a direct way. Nor Bois B'Derech Hashlila. You can only know what it's not. Yidiyas Hashlila. Yes, the more you know what it's not, you get a little bit of understanding what it is. But you don't have a direct knowledge in it in a positive way. You only know what it's not, and that's how you know what you're talking about, what it is. But the Rambam is mevar baruch b'sifrei Mera Nevuchim. As the Rambam explains at length in his Sefer, the Mera Nevuchim, as if an Eberstein is nechayich zusammen kein toyarim chiyuvim. That about Hashem, it doesn't really fit to say any positive descriptions. All the descriptions are not positive. We're saying Hashem is wisdom. Hashem is not wise. Hashem is not wise. So he is void of not being wise, but he's not described as wise. These are descriptions of saying that what he's not. Ledugba, for example, when we say the Eibishter wise, meint nor. It only means he's wise that we're rejecting not being wise. Not as mis shoyle von him, als was is hepech hachokma. It only means that we're negating, we're rejecting, and saying about Hashem everything which is not wise. He doesn't. He is wise. He has everything. Nothing which is not wise is he missing, and that's what we're calling him wise. But he doesn't have the chiyuv of what wise is. But there is a bishara Torah, similar to other descriptions. Und der Riber, and therefore, kemen dem Eibishter nicht verstehen bei Soge Chiyuvis. Can't understand Hashem in a direct, in a positive, in a way directly, nor in an oifon von Hasogas Hashlila, only by knowing what he is not. Now, when you know what he's not, and the more you know that he's not, you actually add, the more it becomes known. Und Chotsch euch Idee Hashlila is idea. But also, even though it's also known, as with the Rambam is mevayer, and the Rambam explains, is durch ribuy hashlilos, durch so many saying what he is not, Mer Nevuchim explains, is durch ribuy tikarev el hasoge v'tiye Yisro korev elov. So you're going to become close to understanding, and you'll be closer to it by knowing everything that it's not. You get closer to it. So they'll bring you closer, the descriptions of what he's not, to knowing Hashem Yisborach and grasping him, not directly, but through all the indirect ways. You'll get a better understanding and you'll be closer to Hashem. Von deswegen, afilu bei dem höchsten Eifrin Hasogas Hashlila, even in the highest grasp of knowing everything he's not, is das nit a hasoge mahus habayra. It's not understanding who the bayra, the essence of who the bayra is. That amitis emotzi, the true existence. Bleibt behalten hech von hasoge. That remains hidden higher than hasoge. So therefore, the Rebbe brings out this idea of the two ways of knowing something directly and knowing something indirectly, knowing what it's not. Yes, through knowing what it's not, you also get some idea closer to what it is. but you can never get to the essence of it. Uh, so there's a difference between how we know Maisa Merkava, which we only know what it's not, the knowledge of Hashem in that ways, and the difference of the Maisa Bereshis. Over there we have a grasp in Chiyuv and what it is. And this explains the Chilek, why the Rambam changes the Lashon uh, in another place, Tippe ben Ayam Kemar Midli. The Rebbe will explain it out. Damit wird man euch test, wird man euch verstehen dem Shinu Lashon Rambam, wenn er gehe Meise Merkava, Meise Bereshis. He also changes the language when he talks about the Meise Merkava and the Meise Bereshis. When er gehe Meise Bereshis, sagt the Rambam says, Dvorim elu shomarnu b'inyan zeh b'shnei prokim elu. That what we said about these matter in these two prokim, the first two prokim of the Rambam, elu k'mei tipa min hayam. It's like a drop of the ocean. Hey, mimashe tzorich levai b'inyan zeh, from what you need to explain in this matter. Just he's saying, using the language of a drop from the ocean. You can imagine the ocean, even though the ocean is actually also limited, it's made up of drops, but it signifies a tremendous amount, more than a drop. How much is the ocean? When it comes to Maise Bereshis, Mashenkin and Redvek Maise Bereshis, however, on the post, when the Rambam talks about the creation, the act of creation, Zokter Koladvorim Eilish Debarnu B'Inyan Zeh, all this that we had spoken in this matter is Kemar Midlihem. It's like a drop of a bucket. Not talking about the ocean anymore. Here we're talking about a bucket of water, a drop of a bucket, amar kimar midli, like a drop of water from a bucket. The analysis is moving bepashtus, but based on the above that we're talking about, that the Ma'aseh Merkava we can't really understand fully why we give there the marshal of a tip ben ayam, and it's another category of understanding, and the understanding of Ma'aseh Bereshis we do understand, but it's deep. Papi analysis movement pashtus, understood simply. The union of Ma'aseh Bereshis is eine Bagbolim. The matter of Ma'aseh Bereshis is limited. Warum sie seien in Unionim shebebriya? They are creation. They are matters of creation. Und der Rebbe Chotz, the Rambam sagt blois klolim v'roshi prokim chulu. So even though the Rambam says he's just giving you some generalities, he's just giving you some head of chapters, headlines, he's just giving you titles, some short synopsis. Was der Faris das blois kimar? That's why it's only like a drop. Tippa is the sobe with the erech von a tippa legabadli. It's still relative to a drop, relative to a bucket. Was the kamas amayim was gated adli is with tzimtzum gadol. How much water, the quantity of water that goes into a bucket is very limited, very restricted. Bagbola gedola, it's a big limitation. Because it's bereshis, it's part of creation, it's mugbal. Mashenkim and Ma'aseh Merkava, as opposed to Ma'aseh Merkava, zog the Rambam kitipah ben hayam. Here he uses the language like a drop of the ocean. The Yam shows on the matter which is unlimited. Bizas behaloche, in haloche is Yam, wird angerufen mein Shen Lemsof. Their water has no end. That's why we refer to water with regards to Aguna, with regards to determining something happened for sure. Yam has no end. We don't know. It's called limitless. Now, so therefore, it's a totally different understanding and lack of understanding when it comes to Maaseh Merkava, when it comes to Das Beiram, it doesn't have at all the limit. Now, does it mean that it really doesn't have a Hagbola, the ocean? No, because the Gemara says that there is we can estimate how many drops there is. Unagam, azoich the Mayim von Yam haben a Gvul. Even the water of the Yam do have a limit. Bis the Gemara sagt, Yoiden l'shayr kama tipus yesh b'Yam. The Gemara says that you are able to estimate how many drops there is in the water. That brings down the Gemara in Horius. From deswegen, but yet, those gufa was mizoktiv yam, mayim shein sof. The fact that you call it mayim shein sof, even though there is, but why is it called Maim Shem L'Sof? Is a Chocha. That is the evidence that the Ribu Godel B'Yoser, as the Ribu Godel B'Yoser, that this great amount of water from Mei Hayam is Ad Kedei Kach. So much there, as we can have them Zog Ein Sof, that you can say no end. Apitoira, b'shem hamushla kolponim, with a borrowed name. It's not really unlimited, maybe, but the fact that you can even use ein lahem uh, sof means that it's a tremendous amount, and that's because there's a whole different level. This is das boidim, this is das ma'aseh bereishis. That's limited, that's unlimited. Boid yesh lemer, and the Rebbe says further. Another idea in this why it's called Ein Sof, because even though the waters do have a limit, but uh, they have the potential to be unlimited. Yud Mikra Mole Dibarakos. There is a full verse. The pasuk says it openly. Kol hanecholim hilchim elayam. All the rivers go to the yam, and the pasuk says, "V'hayam einanu mole." The yam is not filled. As the yam is kemon lit mole, it can never be filled. Can never fill, meaning there is never a limit to fill it. And they can say, "Adozos men zokt mei hayam." Why do we say about the water of the yam, "Maim shem lam sof"? It doesn't have an end. It's not the quantity. There's no end, meaning you can never fill it. He says, "Vavibald as the yam is in a since you can fill it, ken in em arayin umbekoichis em dov maim bligvul." And therefore, it's in him potentially, he has the unlimited water there. The Mei Hayam Zainen Bepoil Mitagvul. The actuality, they have a limit. The Yodim L'Shayr Kamatipas Yesh Bayam. As the Rebbe quotes in the Mori in Harius, we can estimate how many drops there are. But potentially is the Yam Nit Mole Mideala Tipis. The Yam doesn't get full with the old drop. Es is an ort for Mein Shem Sof. It's a place where there's no end. And therefore, bebald as the Inyoni from Maise Merkovat seinen Hecher von Agbolus v'gidre habriya. Therefore, since the act of Merkava are higher than the limitations and the boundaries of creations, seien sie ein Inyan from Yam. The Rambam says that they're like a Yam, tipa min a Yam. Mein shein lem sof. There's no end to it. And as opposed to Maise Bereshis, the Rambam says that's Kimar Midli. That's just like a drop of a bucket. And now we also understand why the Rambam uses Mayim Layom Echasi. But was the Rambam is Moisi b'Seif Sifrei Dem Sir Makosuf. We also understand the Rambam adds in the end of the Sefer, the end of the Posik, Kamayim Layom Echasi, like the water covers the sea. The mit is a merabis. The Rambam wants to hint over here. As af al pivos ba'isen hayomim. Even though in those days they will grasp the knowledge of their creator to the extent of the power of the person, since it is the knowledge of their creator, it's Hashem's knowledge, is as alamal oich hecher from the nivra, it always remains higher from the created being. Kamayim lechom layom mechasim. It's like the water covers the sea. Erkenes nemen, it's always covered, which means you can't take it directly. Erkenes nemen blois b'dis hashtila canal. You can only take this knowing what it's not, but it's still covered. It's kamayim that covered. This thing is still covered. It's never directly known. It's not visible. It's not yidiyas achiv. It's not only yidiyas hashlila. So the Rebbe gave two explanations, but the bottom line is Yam is called Ein Sof. Whether it's Ein Sof means that it's a law, even though the Gemara says you can count it up. So the Rebbe says before, it is a great quantity, or because the pasuk says it never fills, so potentially it has the unlimited qualification. But the bottom line is, Ma'aseh Merkava are the knowledge of Hashem, which is limitless, and therefore it is like a tipa min hayam, it's like the yam, ein lamsov, as opposed to mar midli by the Ma'aseh Bereshis. They're deep, stumim, but they're still limited, and that's why the Rambam at the end brings down when he talks about das beirum k'mayim liyom achasim, because over there it always remained machasim, because the Rebbe said before, by the das beirum you can only know idiyas hashlila, so it's always still covered. Yudalef, the kol anal hot menoicha eroa, benegei dem limud inyonim fu ma'aseh merkov ma'aseh bereshis. From all of the above, we also have a lesson about studying these matters of ma'aseh merkava, the acts of the chariot and the acts of creation. The Rambam schreibt b'Akdama Sifrei in Minyan HaMitzvos Al Seder Halachas Rambam. The Rambam writes in the introduction to his Sefer, when he brings down the numbers, when he counts all the mitzvahs on the orders of the halachas of the Rambam, as in Sefer HaMitzvos Oter Koile Given, that he included in the book of Mada, he included Kol HaMitzvos Shehem Iker Das Moshe Rabbeinu Olav HaSholem. All the mitzvahs that are the main of the religion that Moshe Rabbeinu gave us, Moshe Tishel, blessed of him. And before anything, person needs to know them. So, was der Funis verstandig, wenn geht zum Sefer Hamada Gufo. So, we also understand, as it pertains to the Sefer Hamada itself, if he says that the whole Mada, within the Mada itself, the order is that first you have to know everything that he writes in the first 4 chapters. As the Inyonim was der Rambam hat gestellt bereish Sefer Hamada, in the beginning of the Sefer Hamada, angerufen Hilchos Yisod HaTorah, and he calls it, these are the laws of the basis of the Torah. Darf man lernen, noch eider man lernt die anderen Inyonim of Sefer Hamada. We have to study them before we learn the other matters of the Sefer Hamada. Balachas kam v'kamo, and more, certainly more before the Inyonim of the Shpetatik writes in Sefer Hayad, those matters that are in the other 13 books. But within the first book itself, this comes first. And when we learn within the halacha of Yisod HaTorah itself, so first you have to learn Yisod HaTorah. Which of the chapters in Yisod HaTorah first? Darf man zum allem ersten wissen. First, you have to know very first Yisod is Amud HaChochma, the pillar of all pillars and the foundation of all foundations, the pillar of all wisdom. You have to learn that first. Uvibald as the alinyone arba prokem elu shebechomesh mitzvus ha'elu. Since the idea of these chapters that are in these 5 mitzvahs, that the earlier sages called them pardas, quoting the Rambam, that is necessary in order to fulfill the basis of all bases, the foundation needed first. The Rambam says that the 4 matters, this is the pardas, and this is all one aspect necessary to fulfill the knowing Hashem, the basis of everything, to know Hashem, to know that there is existence. Most tradition, I said before about length. Come to us. So it turns out that in addition to the obligation to learn generally these anyonim, then you have to learn this matters, the Ma'aseh Bereshis, Ma'aseh Merkava, fardam limud von anderen Yonei Torah, before the items of other aspects of Torah. Oh. So here we're going to get involved in learning this very first, and the Rambam says himself, he's going to qualify and say only the one who's already learned halacha and knows what's prohibited should learn these Ma'aseh Merkava, learn Ma'aseh. When here we're saying we got to start with this. This is the Yisoida, and that's the partis that's necessary to fulfill the mitzvah of Yidis Hashem. So according to this, if this is what it seems like we have to learn first, the very first study limud, so we need to understand what the Rambam writes about this. And I say, that it's not fitting to walk around this pardus in Halay Perik Dalad, in Halachit Gimel. Elamission is malik kreisei lachem ubasar. Only one who has filled his stomach with bread and meat, which means leidos of amutar to know what's prohibited and permissible, he should go to the pardus. As the Inyoni from Pardes Shabbat Prokim Ha'elu, that those aspects of the Pardes that are in these 4 chapters, Daf Meleven Erst Novda V'Meveshen Kama V'Kama Lechem B'Basam V'Luchas HaTorah, after you already have the knowledge of a lot of bread and meat from the laws of the Torah. So, how are we going to start with this Yisoidus with the mitzvah of believing in Hashem? And that's something that we have to learn. As the Rambam says that Tzorich Adam Leida Oisam Tchilas HaKoil, we need to know this first. So we need to know this first. And then the Rambam says you can't learn this first. You got to learn Yisro V'Heter first. V'Yiseirim is more than this. The Rambam Shnait Bagdam Sifrei. The Rambam writes in the introductions to the Sefer Hayad, Adam Toy Koyre B'Toyre Shebiksav Tchila. First, you learn the Torah Shebiksav, then you read right in the Rambam. And you'll know, if you learn the Rambam, you will know all the oral Torah. You don't have to, in between the Torah and the Rambam, you don't have to learn any other Sefer. Noch Torah Shebiksav lernt man nicht shar Svarim for Torah Shebapeh. Now, after you learn the written Torah, you don't learn any other books of the oral Torah. Upshita nit havayis dabei v'rova. And certainly not the questions of Abaye and Rava, the Abayis Abaye and Rava, or the Milik Kreis Lechem Basar, or to fill your stomach with Lechem Basar. The Rambam writes, you go straight over to the Rambam. Nor the erste Zach, the very first thing, was the Rambam learned with him is, what does the Rambam learn with him? The Rambam says no. The first thing learning, Maise Merkava, Maise Bereshis. You learn Maise Merkava, Maise Bereshis. You don't learn anything else. And that's the way the order. So, how do we say the Rambam says that this is the first in the Mina Mitzvahs that you have to know that's the you say that Torah Mada, and the Rambam says you can learn, you have to right away learn these halachas. So how does the Rambam write in the introduction that, and how to write here now that in the Royal Tailba mission is Malik Reise, only the one who has already learned the Ilchos Hester. The Rambam himself said they should start learning these halachas right away. Zois Void, this and more than this. The Dalet Prokma the Rambam reingestellt bis Sifrei. The Rambam put it in his Sefer Evach Nerzog Damasoi, in which he says in his introduction, Adosis Lakotum V'Lagodl. That this is for the minor and for the adult. Upshita as a cotton is nit mila kreise lachem abasar. So if it's for a minor too, so we know a minor did not fill his stomach with lechem abasar, he's still a cotton. So and so that means that he still should learn it. So how does the Rambam write himself that you can't do the pardes only mission is malik kreise lechem abasar? Very hard to understand. In the introduction of the Rambam, by the introduction to the Sefer Hamada, he writes that in the beginning of the Rambam Akdome, he writes that you go from Torah Shebiksav straight to this, which comes first over here. The Rambam says Lakotan. How does the Rambam say here that you can only learn the Pardes after Milik Reisa? Yid Gimel. So the Rebbe says There's two ways of learning Pardes. These basic principles that the Rambam has, this you have to know lechatchila. You start with this. But this is not L'Tayil B'Pardes. Tayil B'Pardes talks about a much higher level, which is a second step. And then, Taka, you need Mili Kreisek. You Gimel the beer in them. The explanation is, the Rambam Bavornt is B'diuk L'Shoinei. The Rambam cautions us and answers this question in this precise language. Ein roi L'Tayil B'Pardes. It's not fitting to take a walk and to enjoy the Pardes. As Mishanah Veloshon Chazal was bring the Gufa. He changes the language of the Chazal that he brings it. Nicht nesu le Pardes. It doesn't say in royu le konis le Pardes. The tile made klal nit reingehen. Tile doesn't mean not to enter. Nor sein in Pardes ba'ariches u ba'oifen shel tiyul tainug. But to remain and at length spend time and in a way that you are walking around, you're enjoying it. To occupy yourself with a deep and a wide reflection, so you get enjoyment from these matters. So, so that type of study in Pardes darf sein erst noch dem. That needs to be after after you filled your stomach with meat and with bread and meat, meaning Yisro v'heter. U'nechet kibsak Rambam, also as the Rambam rules, tzivu chachomim harishonim, the first sages instructed, shein dershim b'devarim ha'elu b'rabim. You don't do it publicly because there is a limitation in a way of litayel. However, as opposed to these matters as the Rambam records them in the first chapter in the Rambam, they're not a lengthy explanation in the Rambam. The Rambam Alain is madgish, as he emphasizes, as his they're just a drop in the ocean from what is necessary to explain in this matter. Similar is what he declares about the teaching that he brings down about the act of creation, and they're just like a drop of the bucket. Kemar midli, canal zayin ze feeling it together for Rosh Prokim. And I said before, they're not even defined as headlines or the titles of chapters, heads of chapter. For Mafilo Rosh Prokim, for Maisim Merkava, Tormanit Darshan Barambam. Because even the Rosh Prokim of Maisim Merkava, you're not allowed to expound publicly. So, therefore, these are not even Rosh Prokim. These are not for a minor to. Nor blows ideas clolius, but there is just general ideas, or they're yisodius. They're fundamentals, but they're just general. Was the far is those klal together from the tile bepardas. That's why that's not included in the definition of the tile bepardas. So that's taken not allowed, and ain't dershim, and you got to fill melekresoi belechem abasar. But the four prokim that the Rambam brings down the part is not necessary. That's not l'tayim. That's tchilas hakoil, and that's what you have to start right away, and that's important. So that's why the Rebbe concludes now. But the way, so while you can't be metayil, but the way that Rambam brings it down in the headlines and the ideas in the general way that you have to do, yudala do leidach. But on the other hand, in them oifen. But to learn these matters in this way, the idea is close in a general way, the Rambam as the Rambam has set it up in his Sefer, is adarab, in the contrary, dos muzman lernen tchilas hakoil. This you have to learn before anything else, as he writes in the Hagdama, in the for the Sefer Ram, for the in the mitzvah, for the Sefer Hamada. Because the foundation of all foundation, the pillar of wisdom is as mizlahom ha'yidiyah. The Meibishter, you have to have knowledge in Hashem. The andra halachas, HaTorah, and the other laws of the Torah, shtein of them amud, they are standing on that pillar. Und seine meyusr them yisoid, and they are based on this foundation. Und durch dem Eisek eats the Yoni for this Hashem. By studying now these matters of knowing Hashem, is Mazeicha Bekorif, we merit soon to Mesa Mashiach, there's a Mashiach, when Bilshena Rambam Kinal, as using Rambam's language before, Loyia Eisek HaTorah Kol Oilam Das Hashem Bilvad, will the knowledge, the occupation of the world will be just to know Hashem alone. The world will be filled with knowledge of Hashem like the water that covers the ocean. This is Mesichas Yud Aleph Nisan, and Achron Shapesach Shabbat Parshas Emer in the year Tavshin Dalad Mem, and Shabbos Parshas Ve'era in the year Tavshin Mem.